Hi guys, okay, so we are gonna finish these last 6 problems for your review before we take a chapter test, which will be next week, okay? So make sure you are paying attention to your Google Classroom, and if you have any questions, please let me know at the end of this. So this question right here, again, we're gonna have to FOIL right here, okay? Because there's a trinomial, so I know I'm gonna end up having an M and an M. So the only way that I can get this sign or this term right here to be a negative, because remember, that's my last times my last. So that means I'd have to have one that has to be a positive and one that has to be a negative. Okay, and now I need to figure out the factors of 16 that I can somehow create a 6, a positive 6. So my factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. Okay, well the 1 and 16 I cannot manipulate at all to create that, so that one's pretty much out. The 4 and the 4 I can't do much with either, because if I add them, then it's 8. If I subtract them, it's 0. Okay, so I'm left with the 2 and the 6. Well, if you think about it, if you have a positive 8 and a negative 2, that gives me that positive 6, right? So if I want a positive 6, I need this one to be a positive, this one to be a negative. And remember, if you can't remember which one you should put there, just try it and then check your work. If you check your work and it's not in the correct spot, then your answer will be wrong when you check it. It won't match up to what it should be up here, and then you don't automatically switch it. Okay, so now I should always check though, like we just discussed. So I'm gonna get an m squared. Outer is gonna give me a negative 2m. Inner gives me a plus 8m. And then last gives me a negative 16. When I simplify, I get an m squared. This gives me a plus 6m minus 16. And since this one matches that one, that's my answer. Okay, so now we're into this one. Now we have 2 negatives. Okay, so on this one, I'm gonna have an n and an n. Now I need to think of the factors of 20, so I have 1 and 20. I'm gonna have 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and that's it. Okay, so I need to think about what number is actually in this middle term. Well, in front of this is really, it's actually a 1. Okay, and again, to get this term to be a negative, 1 has to be positive, 1 has to be negative. Okay, so which factors can I manipulate to give me a 1? Well, 1 and 20, not gonna work. 2 and 10, not gonna work. But these ones I can, right? Because if I need it to be a negative 1, well then if I had a negative 5 plus 4, that gives me a negative 1. So my 5 needs to be in the negative, my 4 needs to be in the positive. Now I just simply check. So n times n is n squared. Outer gives me a negative 5n. Inner gives me a positive 4n. And last gives me a negative 20. Simplify again, I get n squared minus n minus 20. So then this is my correct answer. Okay, we got the next couple. So these 2 right here just has to multiply. So remember, how do you multiply 2 binomials? Well, you FOIL. Okay, so I would take 2y times 2y. That's going to give me a 4y squared. Outer is going to give me a negative 6y. Inner gives me a positive 6y. And last gives me a negative 9. So what happens to these middle terms? Well, they cancel, which we should have noticed, because I have the exact same thing in the parentheses, right? One's positive, one is negative. So that's what's supposed to happen right here, is if they have a positive and a negative of the exact same thing, remember these should cancel. So then my final answer is just 4y squared minus 9. Okay, so on this one, again, your outer and your inner term should cancel because you have a negative and you have a positive of the exact same terms. So when I multiply, 4x times 4x gives me a 16x squared. Outer gives me a plus 12xy. Inner gives me a negative 12xy. And last gives me a negative 9y squared. Well, again, these cancel. So then I get a 16x squared minus 9y squared. And then I'm done. So now we're on to these ones where we kind of basically do this, but we're going in opposite order. Okay, so now to break this one up, I know to get an n squared, I need an n and an n. Okay, and the only way to get a middle term to cancel out is if you have a positive of a variable and a negative next to it. Okay, so what numbers would cancel out with 25? So what factors are going to cancel out? Well, that would be your ones that match. So it would be the 5 and 5. Now if you check this, you'd have n times n, which is n squared. Outer is going to give you a negative 5n. Inner gives you a positive 5n. And this gives you a negative 25. These cancel, which gives you an n squared minus 25. And does that match? It does. So that's my answer. And the last one. Okay, so again, I need to think in terms of how am I going to get an x squared? Well, that'd be an x and an x. But now I also have a y attached to it, so it'd be a y and a y, right? I have a plus and a minus because there's no middle term. And the only factors of 1 are 1 and 1. So now I can check this. If I FOIL this, I'd get x y times xy, which gives me that x squared y squared. Outer gives me a negative xy. Inner gives me a positive xy. And last gives me a negative 1. Well, these cancel. So you just get that x squared y squared minus 1, which matches. So then this right here is your answer. Okay, so we just went through 12 questions that are hopefully going to help you for this test. Remember, if you have any questions, so please let me know before you actually take the test, which will be next week. Okay, so make sure you are getting your answers either today or Monday before you take the test. And I will be talking to you guys again shortly next week. See you later.